But Maya wasn't like most students. She was human, which meant she saw opportunities where others saw risks. One run, Vrathix finally said. You'll take a small research vessel, minimal crew, standard shielding. Complete the Razak Nebula crossing using your methods. We'll have conventional ships running the same route simultaneously, for comparison. If you succeed, we'll discuss implementation. If you fail, I won't fail, Maya said with absolute confidence. The preparation. 2 days later, I found myself aboard the research vessel Pathfinder, helping Maya prepare for what was either going to be a historic achievement or spectacular disaster. You volunteered for this? I asked, checking sensor calibrations. Why? You're my friend, Maya said simply. Also, you're one of the best navigators in our class. If something goes wrong, I want someone who can calculate a conventional route out quickly. That's assuming we survive long enough for conventional calculations. Where is your sense of adventure? My species doesn't have a word for adventure. We have 12 different words for various types of preventable disasters. She grinned. You're going to need a 13th after today. The Pathfinder was small. Crew of 4 plus the 2 of us. Captain Torres, human like Maya, seemed entirely too comfortable with this plan. The other crew members, a Quellan engineer, and a Zephian communication specialist, looked as nervous as I felt. Lieutenant Chen, Captain Torres said as we completed pre-flight, I've reviewed your pattern data. It's impressive. But I need to know, are you absolutely certain about this? Captain, I've watched the Razak Nebula every day for a month. I can see its patterns like you see your own breathing. We'll be fine. That's not the reassurance I was hoping for. Would you prefer a confident lie or an honest assessment? Torres laughed. Honest assessment, always. Into the pattern. Ignore it, Maya interrupted. Excuse me? It's following the pattern. It'll dissipate in 40 seconds without coming near us. Stay on current heading. Lieutenant, that anomaly could destroy us, Torres said. Only if we panic and change course. The pattern will move it away. Trust the pattern. I watched the anomaly on sensors, my Quellan survival instincts screaming that we should calculate an escape route. But Maya just sat there, watching her displays with calm confidence. 40 seconds later, exactly as she'd predicted, the anomaly dissipated. How did you know? I asked. The pattern told me. Anomalies don't form randomly. They form in response to pressure gradients in the quantum field. If you understand the gradients, you understand where anomalies will go. 5 hours and 43 minutes after entering the Razak Nebula, we emerged on the other side. Safe, intact, with energy reserves to spare. The conventional ships running parallel routes wouldn't arrive for another 6 hours. The aftermath. The Navigation Council had no choice but to acknowledge reality. Maya's pattern-based navigation worked. Not just worked, it exceeded every expectation. Within a week, they'd authorize a comprehensive study of quantum field patterns across major shipping routes. Within a month, they'd approved pilot programs for training navigators in observation-based techniques. Within 6 months, pattern-based navigation became standard curriculum at every navigation academy in the galaxy. Maya received commendations, scholarship offers, and interview requests from a dozen major shipping corporations. She turned down most of them, preferring to stay at the academy and develop her methods further. You could be wealthy, I pointed out one evening as we reviewed data in the study commons. Those corporations offered serious money. I'm not interested in money. I'm interested in understanding how space works. That's very noble. It's also more fun. Money just sits there. Patterns keep revealing new secrets. She pulled up star maps, already identifying new regions to study. That human gleam was back in her eyes, the one that meant she was planning something. Lieutenant Chen, Counselor Vrathix began, his Kryn features reflecting the star maps around us. We've reviewed your examination results. Your pattern-based navigation through the Razak Nebula was unconventional. Thank you, Counselor, Maya replied, deliberately choosing to interpret that as a compliment. That wasn't praise, Counselor Selthera interjected. The Quellan counselor, my own species, looked particularly disapproving. It was observation. Your method bypasses 3 centuries of proven navigation science. With respect, Counselor, my method builds on that science. I didn't ignore the quantum mechanics. I just added another layer, observing how those mechanics actually manifest in real space. You claim the Razak Nebula breathes, another counselor said, reading from a datapad. You describe quantum space as having currents and tides. These are metaphors, not scientific descriptions. Are they? Maya leaned forward slightly. What do we call it when quantum probability fields shift in predictable patterns? What do we call the way gravitational influences create regions of higher and lower energy density? I use ocean metaphors because they're accurate. Fluid dynamics applies to quantum fields. We just never thought to look for it. Because it's not relevant, Vrathik said. Our calculations account for all necessary variables. Do they? Maya pulled up a holographic display. She'd been given permission to present evidence. Here's the standard calculated route through the Razak Nebula. Notice how it requires constant course corrections. 73 separate adjustments. Over 12 hours. Why? Because space is dynamic, Salthera answered. Conditions change. Ships must adapt. Exactly. Conditions change in predictable patterns. But our calculations treat each woman as isolated. We calculate position A to position B, then recalculate B to C and C to D. 73 separate calculations, each fighting against the natural movement of space. What are you doing? I whispered from the adjacent terminal. We'd been study partners for months, and I developed this habit of monitoring her work. Someone had to prevent disaster. Watching, she said simply, you can't calculate what you don't understand. The algorithms calculate for you. That's their purpose. The algorithms make assumptions. They treat space like empty nothing with obstacles. But what if space is more like ocean? Water with currents and tides. Space isn't water, Maya. No, but quantum fields behave like fluids. They flow, they have pressure gradients, and the Razak Nebula specifically. Look at this. She pulled up a visualization showing energy patterns over the past month. See how it pulses? Every 7.3 hours, like I said. The entire structure contracts and expands, like breathing. I looked at the data. She was right. There was definitely a pattern. But using patterns instead of calculations violated every principle of modern navigation. Even if that's true, I said carefully, the exam requires quantum navigation protocols. You'll fail if you submit anything else. Will I? The assignment says calculate a safe jump path. It doesn't specify the method. Just like Professor Thalvin's metallurgy assignment last semester. I groaned. The entire academy had heard about the bone knife incident. Maya had become famous or infamous for finding loopholes in assignment parameters. The pattern emerges. 2 hours into the exam, most students had completed their calculations. Standard routes, standard safety margins, standard everything. Passing grades, certain and boring. Maya was still watching her feeds. Lieutenant Chen, Professor Selthar approached her terminal. You should have preliminary calculations by now. Everyone else has merely finished. I have something better than calculations, sir. I have observations. She pulled up her work on the main display. Instead of pages of quantum mathematics, she showed movement patterns, flowcharts, timing sequences. The nebula has 3 main current streams, she explained. They rotate in a predictable pattern. If you enter during the expansion phase, right here, and follow the natural flow instead of forcing a straight line path, you reduce energy expenditure by 60% and cut travel time in half. That's not navigation, Selthar said. That's gambling on patterns you think you see. With respect, sir, that's exactly what navigation used to be. Ancient Polynesian sailors crossed entire oceans by reading waves and stars. They didn't have computers. They had observation and understanding. Ancient Polynesians weren't traveling through quantum space. No, but they understood their medium. They worked with it, not against it. We treat space like an enemy to be calculated and conquered. What if we treated it like an environment to be understood? The demonstration. The chamber had gone silent again. Everyone was watching the exchange. Professor, one of the teaching assistants called out. The simulation system can test her route. We could run it against the standard calculations. Selthar's crystalline features flickered with what might have been frustration or curiosity. Very well. Load Lieutenant Chen's route into the simulator. We'll see how observation compares to mathematics. Maya input her course. Not dense calculations, but timing markers. Entry points, flow directions. It looked more like a dance choreography than a navigation plot. The simulator ran both routes simultaneously. Maya's pattern-following path and the standard calculated route. The standard route worked exactly as expected. The simulated ship jumped through the nebula in 12 hours, maintaining safe margins throughout. Reliable, proven, boring. Maya's route was different. The ship entered during the nebula's expansion phase, caught one of those current streams she'd identified, and rode it like a wave. The simulator showed the vessel flowing through space, adjusting position with minimal energy expenditure. Travel time, 6 hours. Energy usage, 40% less than standard. Safety margins, actually higher than the conventional route because the ship wasn't fighting against natural forces. Nobody spoke. We just stared at the results, watching the numbers that shouldn't be possible. Huh, Maya said, examining her screen. It worked even better than I projected. The pattern was more stable than I thought. Sir, I think with more observation time, we could map dozens of safe routes to the nebula. Create a library of pattern-based navigation. All I did was watch. I didn't invent anything new or discover some revolutionary technology. I just paid attention to what space was already doing. The patterns were always there. Nobody thought to look for them. That's the human difference, I said. You look at what everyone else considers background noise and see symphonies. She smiled. Then I guess I should keep listening. There's a whole galaxy out there, and I bet it has more to teach us. We returned to our studies, but I knew this was just the beginning. Maya would keep questioning, keep observing, keep finding patterns where others saw only numbers. And somehow, impossibly, she'd keep being right. The galaxy had its protocols, its proven methods, its careful calculations. It also now had pattern-based navigation, because one human couldn't sleep and decided to watch what space actually did, instead of what equations said it should do. That kind of thinking either changed the universe or broke it. With Maya, it seemed to do both. And that was exactly what made her brilliant. The end. Let's assume your observations are accurate, Verathix said carefully. Implementing pattern-based navigation would require retraining every navigator in the fleet, updating every navigation computer, revising centuries of protocols. The cost would be recovered in fuel savings within 6 months, Maya interrupted. With I ran the economics, commercial shipping alone would save enough energy to power 3 entire colony worlds. That's not counting military applications, emergency response improvements, or opening previously too dangerous regions for exploration. You've analyzed the economics too? Salfera asked. Couldn't sleep. Insomnia again. So I ran the numbers. I had to suppress a laugh. Only Maya would casually admit to revolutionizing galactic navigation because she had trouble sleeping. The test nobody expected. Very well, Verathix said after a long silence. We'll test your methods. We'll send a probe through the Rosic Nebula using your pattern-based route. If it performs as claimed, we'll consider further evaluation. With respect, Counselor, a probe isn't enough. The chamber went very quiet. You didn't contradict a Navigation Council decision, not if you wanted to keep your academy position. Excuse me? Verathix's crystalline features darkened. A probe can test the route, but it can't demonstrate the method. Pattern-based navigation requires real-time observation and adjustment. You need a human navigator watching the patterns and responding to them. Otherwise, you're just following a pre-programmed path I created. That's not the same thing. You're suggesting we risk a crewed vessel? I'm suggesting you let me prove this works. Give me a ship, a crew, and the Rosic Nebula run. If I fail, I'll accept any consequences. But if I succeed, you'll have undeniable proof that pattern-based navigation is viable. The council members conferred in hushed tones. This was unprecedented. Students didn't demand practical demonstrations from the Navigation Council. Students certainly didn't volunteer to risk their lives proving unconventional theories. She expanded the display. Now look at my route. 6 major adjustments, each one timed to work with the nebula's patterns instead of against them. Same starting point, same destination, half the time and energy. One successful simulation doesn't prove a theory, Verathix countered. Agreed. That's why I spent the last 3 weeks collecting more data. The evidence mounts. Maya had been busy, very busy. She displayed weeks of observations, patterns in dozens of different regions. The Rosic Nebula wasn't unique. Quantum space everywhere showed similar behaviors: currents, tides, predictable rhythms that standard navigation simply bulldozed through with brute force calculations. I found 73 commercial shipping routes, she continued, that could reduce travel time by 20 to 40% using pattern-based navigation. Most of them are routes we use every day. We've been forcing ships through space the hard way because nobody thought to watch how space actually moves. The council members exchanged glances. This was bigger than one exam. This was a fundamental challenge to how the Razik Nebula from inside looked like chaos made visible. Swirling energies, gravitational eddies, quantum probability fields shifting in ways that made standard sensors unreliable. This was why the conventional route took 12 hours. Ships had to calculate carefully around every danger. Maya sat at the navigation console, but she wasn't looking at calculations. She watched the real-time sensor feeds, eyes tracking the movement of energies around us. There, she said suddenly, the expansion phase just started. Captain, adjust heading to 273 Mark 15. Speed to 1/4 impulse. That takes us deeper into the nebula, Torres observed. Into the current stream. Trust me. Torres adjusted course. The ship slid sideways slightly, caught by forces I couldn't see on the sensors, but Maya apparently perceived clearly. Perfect. Now we ride it. Reduce power to minimal, let the pattern carry us. I watched my own sensor displays, comparing what Maya was doing against what conventional navigation would recommend. She was doing everything wrong, taking us through regions standard protocols mark as dangerous, using minimal power when calculations said we should be running at full thrust. But it was working. The ship flowed through space like a leaf on a stream, moving faster with less energy than should have been possible. Next current shift in 7 minutes, Maya said calmly. We'll need to adjust heading then. For now, just maintain position. Lieutenant, how can you predict that? The engineer asked. Watch the energy fluctuations at the edge of our sensor range. See how they're building? That's the nebula preparing to shift. It's like watching waves approach a beach. You can see them coming if you know what to look for. The assignment that should have been simple. The quantum navigation exam was supposed to be straightforward. Every student at the Galactic Institute of Stellar Cartography had passed it for the last 300 years. The rules were clear. Calculate a jump path through the Razik Nebula using standard quantum navigation protocols. Input the stellar coordinates, account for gravitational wells, apply the approved algorithms, and submit your course. Done. Simple, safe. Professor Zelthar, a Kryn with crystalline features that reflected light like a prism, stood at the front of the simulation chamber. His 3 arms gestured at the holographic display, showing the swirling chaos of the Razik Nebula, a region of space known for crushing ships that miscalculated their junts. You have 4 hours, he announced, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his species. Standard parameters apply. The simulated vessel has conventional shielding, standard quantum drives, and a crew of 200. Your course must maintain safety margins within acceptable limits. Any questions? The chamber held 50 students from 20 different species. We'd all studied the same materials, practiced the same calculations, learned the same methods. This was a test of competence, not creativity. Then Lieutenant Maya Chen raised her hand. I should mention that by this point in the semester, we'd all learned to recognize that particular gesture. Maya was human, one of only 3 in our class, and humans had a reputation. They asked questions that led to complications. They found problems in solutions that had worked for centuries. They had this irritating habit of making simple things complex. Yes, Lieutenant Chen? Professor Zelfar's crystalline features dimmed slightly. He'd taught humans before. Sir, are we restricted to quantum navigation protocols, or can we use alternative methods? The chamber went quiet. Not normal quiet, but that specific silence that happens when someone asks something that sounds innocent, but probably isn't. Alternative methods. Zelthar's voice carried a note of caution. The exam tests quantum navigation competency. What alternative methods were you considering? The assignment that should have been simple. The quantum navigation exam was supposed to be straightforward. Every student at the Galactic Institute of Stellar Cartography had passed it for the last 300 years. The rules were clear. Calculate a jump path through the Razak Nebula using standard quantum navigation protocols. Input the stellar coordinates, account for gravitational wells, apply the approved algorithms, and submit your course. Done. Simple, safe. Professor Zelthar, a Kryn with crystalline features that reflected light like a prism, stood at the front of the simulation chamber. His 3 arms gestured at the holographic display showing the swirling chaos of the Razak Nebula, a region of space known for crushing ships that miscalculated their jumps. "You have 4 hours," he announced, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his species. "Standard parameters apply. The simulated vessel has conventional shielding, standard quantum drives, and a crew of 200. Your course must maintain safety margins within acceptable limits. Any questions?" The chamber held 50 students from 20 different species. We'd all studied the same materials, practiced the same calculations, learned the same methods. This was a test of competence, not creativity. Then Lieutenant Maya Chen raised her hand. I should mention that by this point in the semester, we'd all learned to recognize that particular gesture. Maya was human, one of only 3 in our class, and humans had a reputation. They asked questions that led to complications. They found problems and solutions that had worked for centuries. They had this irritating habit of making simple things complex. "Yes, Lieutenant Chen?" Professor Zelthar's crystalline features dimmed slightly. He'd taught humans before. "Sir, are we restricted to quantum navigation protocols, or can we use alternative methods?" The chamber went quiet. Not normal quiet, but that specific silence that happens when someone asks something that sounds innocent but probably isn't. "Alternative methods." Zelthar's voice carried a note of caution. "The exam tests quantum navigation competency. What alternative methods were you considering?" Professor Zelthar approached the main display slowly, studying the results with all 3 of his eyes. His crystalline features shifted through several colors: confusion, comprehension, reluctant acceptance. "How long did you spend developing this method?" he asked quietly. 3 weeks of observation, another week analyzing the patterns, 2 days planning the actual route. While the rest of your classmates were studying quantum mechanics. I studied quantum mechanics too, sir, but I also watched what actually happens in space, not just what the equations say should happen. The academic earthquake Zelthar turned to address the entire chamber. Lieutenant Chen's approach is unorthodox. It violates standard protocols. It relies on observation over calculation. Maya's expression fell slightly. "It's also brilliant," Zelthar continued. "Genuinely innovative. She's identified something our navigation protocols have overlooked for centuries, that quantum space has natural patterns we can use instead of fight against." Around the chamber, students murmured in surprise. "However," Zelthar added, looking directly at Maya, "you will need to present this to the Navigation Council. They'll want to verify your findings, probably test your methods extensively. This could change how we approach stellar cartography." "Is that a pass, sir?" Maya asked hesitantly. "Lieutenant Chen, you've potentially revolutionized our entire field." "Yes, that's a pass. Full marks. Now please, document everything. Every observation, every pattern, every timing sequence. The council will want comprehensive data." Maya beamed, that particularly human expression of satisfaction that showed too many teeth but somehow wasn't threatening. As the exam concluded and students filed out, I approached Maya in the corridor. "You realize everyone's going to be talking about this," I said. "Good. Maybe they'll start looking at what space actually does, instead of just what calculations say it should do. You turn navigation into pattern recognition using insomnia and stubbornness, mostly observation." This stubbornness was just for arguing with the professor. We walked in silence for a moment. Then my curiosity got the better of me. It always did with humans. "What are you planning for next semester's advanced propulsion course?" Maya's eyes lit up with that familiar gleam. "Well, I've been thinking about how dolphins use bubble rings for propulsion, and I wonder if we could create similar quantum field structures around ships to reduce drag in." "Never mind," I interrupted. "I don't want to know." She laughed. Smart, plausible deniability. But I was already making plans to sign up for the same course. Someone needed to document whatever impossible thing she'd create next. And maybe, just maybe, I'd learn to see the universe the way humans did. Full of patterns waiting to be discovered. instead of problems waiting to be calculated. Behind us, Professor Zelthar was already updating course materials, probably adding new sections on observation-based navigation, adding methods he'd never imagined would be necessary. He'd learn eventually. We all would. You couldn't restrict human creativity with protocols. They just find patterns in the restrictions themselves, and somehow, against all mathematical probability, they'd make it work better than the approved methods. When innovation meets bureaucracy, the Galactic Navigation Council met in a chamber that looked designed to intimidate. Curved walls displayed star maps from 1,000 different systems. The council members sat on an elevated platform, 7 beings, representing the major spacefaring civilizations. They'd been reviewing navigation protocols for centuries, and their expressions suggested they didn't appreciate having those protocols questioned by a human lieutenant who'd been in space for less than 3 years. I sat in the observation section with Maya, wearing my formal academy uniform and trying not to show my nervousness. She'd asked me to attend as a witness to her exam performance. What that really meant was she wanted someone nearby to confirm she wasn't crazy when things got intense. "What are you thinking?" I asked, already regretting the question. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that if quantum space has patterns, maybe hyperspace does too. And if hyperspace has patterns, maybe we've been doing faster than light travel the hard way for centuries." Maya, no. Maya, yes, think about it. I don't want to think about it. Hyperspace is dangerous enough using conventional methods. If you start experimenting, I won't experiment recklessly. I'll observe first. Months of observation, maybe years. And then we'll see if there's a better way. I looked at her determined expression and realized something. This was just the beginning. Maya hadn't revolutionized navigation because she wanted to challenge the system. She'd done it because she genuinely saw space differently than everyone else. She saw patterns where others saw chaos, opportunity where others saw danger. And she wasn't going to stop. The galaxy had spent centuries developing complex calculations to force our way through space. Then one human came along that asked, what if we worked with space instead of against it? That simple question changed everything. Professor Zelthar approached our table, his crystalline features showing what I'd learned to recognize as reluctant pride. "Lieutenant Chen," he said, "the Council wants you to present your methods at the Galactic Navigation Conference next month. They're also discussing creating a new department focused on pattern-based navigation. They want you to head it." "I'm still a student, Professor." "You're a student who changed our entire field. I think we can make an exception." After he left, Maya sat quietly for a moment, processing. "You know what the best part is?" she said finally. "What?" "The human question." "Well, sir, I was reviewing historical Earth navigation techniques back before we had quantum drives, and I noticed some interesting patterns. Old sailors used something called dead reckoning, combined with celestial navigation. They didn't have computers or quantum calculations. They used observation, intuition, and pattern recognition." "Lieutenant Chen," Zelthar interrupted, "we are navigating through quantum space, not Earth's oceans. The mathematics involved." "I understand, sir, but hear me out. Quantum space has patterns too, predictable flows. The Razig Nebula specifically has these repeating wave structures that appear every 7.3 hours. I've been monitoring them for the past 3 weeks. Around me, other students exchanged glances. I'm Vexthor, a Quellan. We're known for our analytical minds and risk-averse nature. Very useful in navigation. Very stressed when paired with humans for group projects." "You've been monitoring the Razig Nebula?" Zelthar asked slowly. "For 3 weeks. Why?" "Couldn't sleep. Insomnia. So I started watching the real-time feeds from the border stations. The nebula's not random, sir. It breathes, like a living thing. And if you time your jumps with its rhythms instead of fighting through with brute force calculations, you could potentially—" "No," Zelthar said firmly. "Absolutely not. Use the standard protocols, show competency in the approved methods. That's the assignment." Maya nodded, but I saw that look in her eyes, that human look that meant she was already planning something. That look that meant the rest of us were about to have a very interesting day. The calculations begin. The exam started. 49 students immediately began the standard approach. Load the stellar map. Input gravitational variables. Calculate quantum probability fields. Run the approved algorithms. Get your safe, predictable, boring route through the nebula. Maya sat at her terminal, but her screen showed something different. She'd pulled up the real-time feeds from border stations. Live data streaming from the actual Razik Nebula. Weather patterns, energy fluctuations, gravitational shifts. Instead of calculating, she was watching.